Have you ever spent hours wondering why certain people completely dominate your thoughts, even when you know deep down that they no longer have a place in your life? It is a strange feeling, isn't it? A single text message, an unexpected silence, or just a fleeting memory can send your mind spiraling for days. Today, you and I are going to unpack this mystery together. The most baffling part of all is that the harder you fight to let them go, the tighter that invisible thread seems to pull you back in. But according to the great psychologist Carl Jung, you are not actually mourning the loss of that person. Instead, you are bound to a psychological image that you have unconsciously projected onto them. Jung believed that whenever your mind becomes hopelessly fixated on another person, it is actually a profound signal from your psyche. The unrecognized, hidden parts of your own soul are desperate to be seen. You might believe you are completely obsessed with them, but in truth, you are coming face to face with your own deep fears, your buried desires, and the unnamed, fragmented pieces of yourself. If you leave these patterns unexamined, you will not only remain trapped by this one connection, but you will likely repeat this exact same cycle with others down the road. We are not here to force you to forget anyone, but to help you uncover the hidden ties that keep you from moving forward. Once you finally start to recognize this truth, a quiet shift begins to happen within you. You will realize that you are not merely escaping an obsessive attachment, but you are actually returning home to yourself in a much gentler, far more peaceful way. Let us look at number 1, which is the heavy burden of thinking about others far too much. It is a subtle, invisible habit that is incredibly difficult to detect, yet it quietly siphons away your vital mental energy every single day. We are not talking about genuine care or empathy here, but rather a pattern of prolonged, repetitive thinking that plays like an endless, exhausting loop inside your mind. Perhaps you constantly catch yourself worrying about how you are perceived, agonizing over whether you made someone uncomfortable, or wondering if your last sentence was completely misunderstood. In your mind, you might even construct elaborate scenarios where you are harshly judged, rejected, or cast in the worst possible light. It is striking to realize that none of this is actually happening in the real world. It is taking place entirely within the quiet chambers of your mind. Yet, that internal theater makes the pain feel heavy, real, and incredibly difficult to escape. After an ordinary conversation, you walk away physically, but your mind stays locked in that room, replaying every word, gesture, and glance. Without a shred of real evidence, your mind begins to build massive assumptions, stacking one doubt on top of another. The more you overanalyze, the more convinced you become that something is terribly wrong, even when everything is completely fine in reality. This does not happen because you are overly sensitive or broken. Rather, your mind is caught in a deeper psychological loop where your entire sense of worth becomes tethered to the opinions of others. As we explore Jung's work, we see his reminder that humans do not merely inhabit the physical world. We live in a world of psychological images we construct ourselves. When you think too much about someone, you stop interacting with the actual human being. Instead of connecting with the real person, you find yourself relating only to a mental caricature, an image constructed from old memories, deep-seated fears, and unconscious projections. This creates a painful cycle. You think you are trying to understand them, but you are actually clashing with the unacknowledged parts of your own identity. There is a profound psychological rule to remember here. When an inner situation is not made conscious, it eventually shows up in your external life as fate. When you ignore your deep inner insecurities, they will materialize outside of you, often wearing the face of other people. You think you are worrying about them, but you are really just facing yourself. Deep down, you are simply reacting to your own hidden terrors, the terror of being rejected, the agony of not feeling good enough, or the paralyzing dread of being judged. Other people merely serve as a convenient screen where you project your internal struggles. Picture your mind as a grand hallway lined with mirrors. When you focus too much of your energy on others, you are essentially standing in front of one of those mirrors, trying desperately to peer through the glass to see what is on the other side. You forget that the very first thing staring back at you is your own reflection. If you do not wake up to this, you will spend your life changing who you are based on distorted glass. Let us look at a very common, everyday scenario. You share a quick post online, and then you find yourself repeatedly checking your phone to see who viewed it, who left a reaction, and who completely ignored it. To your anxious mind, every quiet pocket of silence becomes a complex code that you feel a desperate need to decipher. You catch yourself thinking, Do they secretly dislike me? Or did I say something completely wrong? But the truth is, most people are just wrapped up in their own daily lives. You are the one breathing heavy meaning into their silence, and the more power you give to those blank spaces, the further you drift away from your own calm, natural center. Gradually, you begin to lose the vital boundary between who you actually are and how you believe other people perceive you. As that line starts to blur, you begin living your life as an outside observer, constantly watching yourself through the imagined, critical eyes of the world. You carefully edit your words before you speak, hold back your raw emotions before showing them, and plan your next move based entirely on how you expect others to react. Eventually, you stop living from your own true core and start playing a curated character designed to please everyone else. It is an incredibly specific kind of exhaustion. You feel completely depleted, even when you have not lifted a finger. With every single anxious thought, you are weaving a thin, invisible thread that binds you to another person. A single thread might seem completely harmless, but when hundreds of them wrap around you, they keep you from moving or breathing freely. You deeply desire to focus on your own life, yet your attention gets dragged away again and again. If we look at this through a Jungian lens, we can see how your vital psychological energy gets scattered to the wind, instead of being gathered deep within to fuel your own personal evolution. The more you obsess over others, the more you waste your power on things you cannot influence. Ultimately, the more you try to manage their perception, the more you lose yourself. It is not the thoughts themselves that make thinking about others so incredibly heavy. It is the steep, silent price you pay for them, which is your precious inner freedom. When your mental gaze is constantly directed outward, you completely starve yourself of the space needed to listen to your own voice. Your authentic desires, your true, raw emotions, and your deep, instinctual intuition all get completely drowned out by one single, relentless question that whispers in your mind over and over, "What do they think of me?" And when you allow that quiet, toxic question to become the very center of your daily existence, you do not just lose your peace of mind, you slowly, piece by piece, lose yourself. Let us transition to number 2, which explores the powerful mechanism of projection and how it keeps you completely locked in place, unable to let someone go. In the profound view of Carl Jung, projecting is far more complex than just misunderstanding who someone is. It is a psychological process where your own mind takes the hidden, unrecognized aspects of your own soul and seamlessly attaches them to another person. They do not actually change in reality, but your perception of them is radically transformed. This deep internal misalignment is exactly what causes you to react passionately to a fantasy of your own creation, rather than seeing the actual, flawed human being standing right in front of you. We have all experienced those rare moments when you cross paths with someone and instantly feel an overwhelming, inexplicable wave of peace wash over you. A mere handful of words from their lips, and something rigid inside you suddenly softens and yields. You convince yourself that they must possess a unique, almost magical gift, wrapping you in what feels like a profound healing presence. But if you gather the courage to look closer, you will realize that this comforting tranquility is not a gift they are giving you. It is actually something they are awakening inside your own heart. They have tapped into a deep well of inner calm that you had abandoned, and you mistake your own reflection for love. What is truly happening is that you are simply resonating with a forgotten fragment of your own soul, shining right back at you through them. Conversely, think about the people who seem to possess the terrifying power to hurt you far more deeply than makes any logical sense. A brief, thoughtless comment from them can haunt your thoughts for an entire week, while a sudden silence triggers a flood of agonizing scenarios in your head. It is incredibly easy to believe that they are the sole architect of your suffering, but as Jung reminds us, the truth is far more complex. They are simply brushing against an unhealed, sensitive wound that was already bleeding quietly inside your chest. If that old wound did not exist, their careless actions would feel completely insignificant, barely registered by your attention. The reason projection holds such an intense, almost supernatural grip on you is that it builds a psychological bond that defies all logic. If we are completely honest with ourselves, you already know the connection is unhealthy, and you fully understand that you need to let go, yet you find yourself utterly unable to walk away. This happens because the force binding you to them is not their true character, but the lost pieces of yourself you have left in their care. If you harbor deep fears of abandonment, you will cling, hoping they will be the one to heal you. Your decision to stay has nothing to do with their worth. Rather, it is because something vital inside your own heart feels completely unfinished. Jung famously observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will quietly direct your life, and you will simply call it fate. When you remain blind to the deep currents swirling in your subconscious, every twist of your relationship starts to look like written destiny. You convince yourself that your meeting was cosmically ordained, and you think your agonizing inability to forget them is absolute proof of their special importance. In truth, this is a purely psychological script where your unconscious mind is desperately trying to speak. To express its deepest desires, your unconscious mind uses the mental image of this person as its perfect canvas. This psychological projection is exactly like sitting in a dark movie theater, completely absorbed in the drama unfolding on the screen, forgetting that the light is actually being beamed from a projector behind you. The characters might make you cry, laugh, or ache, but those images do not live on the screen. They originate from a source you do not see. When that projector is turned off, the screen returns to its empty state. The same is true of the person you cannot stop thinking about. When you finally withdraw your projected energy, they lose their hold on you. As the fog of obsession clears, you watch their image slowly return to its actual scale, no longer exaggerated by your longing, no longer distorted by your needs. This is where the deepest, most quiet pain of projection really lives. You see, you aren't just misunderstanding another person, you are fundamentally misunderstanding yourself. You convince yourself that you are madly in love with this specific individual. In truth, you are deeply in love with a hidden part of yourself that is desperately clawing to come alive. You think you need them to feel whole, but what you actually crave is the sense of wholeness you lost somewhere along the way. That special quality keeping you trapped, you placed it on them yourself. This explains why you can never truly free yourself from someone just by forcing your mind to go blank or trying to distract yourself with work and noise. You cannot run away from them because the very thing you are desperately trying to escape is living inside your own chest. It is only when you finally pause, turn your gaze inward, and bravely face the projections, the fears, the raw desires, and the unhealed wounds that the heavy bond between you begins to loosen. It doesn't happen because they suddenly changed, but because the mental image you built of them has shifted. In this way, projection is both your heaviest chain and your doorway to freedom. Without understanding this hidden mechanism, you stay trapped in exhausting cycles with no clear way out. But the moment you truly see it, you start to reclaim all those scattered pieces of yourself that you left behind. As those lost parts slowly return to you, the person you once couldn't stop obsessing over begins to look different, clearer, smaller, and far more aligned with who they actually are in reality. That is the breakthrough moment you realize you were never actually imprisoned by another human being. You were only locked inside the unrecognized rooms of your own soul. Once you see those rooms, you step out quietly, completely free. Let's move on to number 3, the rise of the shadow and its tight grip on your conscious ego. Projection helps you understand why you paint other people with your own personal colors, but there is still a deeper question you simply cannot avoid. Why do you know you are overthinking, yet you still can't make it stop? Why does your rational mind scream that enough is enough, while your emotions keep dragging you back into the dark? The answer doesn't lie in how you perceive others, but in a silent force operating deep within you. Carl Jung called this the shadow. It is not just what you refuse to look at, but the neglected part of your mind that lives in silence. Think of your unprocessed emotions, suppressed needs, and unhealed wounds. None of these things magically vanish just because you choose to ignore them. Instead, they pile up in the dark, waiting for the perfect trigger to pull them back to the surface. When they finally erupt, you are no longer reacting to the present moment. You are responding from ancient, dusty layers of your history that you never truly integrated. Carl Jung once remarked that everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in a person's conscious life, the blacker and denser it becomes. And remember, this shadow doesn't just hold your fears and pain. It also holds the vibrant parts of you that you never dared to live out loud. Your deep need to be loved, your craving for recognition, your wildest desires, your sensitivity, and even powerful energies you were taught to feel ashamed of. You probably recognize this in everyday life. There are moments when you feel entirely fine, confident, and self-sufficient. Then, a certain person appears. They don't even have to do anything extreme. Maybe they just reply a little slower than usual or walk past you without waving. Your logical mind says it is no big deal, but deep inside, a quiet storm begins to brew, a sudden discomfort, a bitter feeling of being unseen. From that exact second, your entire mind starts revolving around them, spinning endlessly. You find yourself analyzing every word, tracking their online status, waiting. It is not because they are genuinely that important to your survival, but because their behavior scraped against a wound that you never allowed to heal. When your shadow is activated, it rarely announces itself with a loud bang. Instead, it works in whispers, magnifying every little emotion. A minor shift in their tone becomes an existential crisis. A tiny bit of physical distance expands until it consumes your every waking thought. A normal person suddenly feels incredibly massive. You might feel like your attention is reaching outward toward them, but in truth, you are being pulled violently inward toward a forgotten piece of yourself. What makes this so difficult to catch in the act is how incredibly convincing it feels. You genuinely believe your intense reactions are logical, that your heavy attachment makes sense, and that your pain is being caused entirely by their actions. But remember what Carl Jung warned us about. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When you fail to see what is hidden inside, it steers your choices, and you mistake its heavy hand for destiny. You convince yourself you are reacting to what is happening right now, but you are actually reacting to what happened years ago. Let's imagine your shadow as a locked room you have kept tightly shut for most of your life. Inside that darkness are all the heavy truths you refuse to face, the terror of being abandoned, the lingering feeling of worthlessness, the desperate craving for attention, and old, painful memories. When a present situation gently knocks against that door, it swings wide open, and everything floods out at once. Your ego gets overwhelmed. To survive, it pushes your focus outward onto another person, keeping you from looking at yourself. You are not stuck in this cycle because you are weak, but because there is a fragile part of you begging to be seen, and you simply aren't ready to face it yet. Your shadow is highly skilled at creating a very convincing illusion. It tricks you into believing that what you are feeling is incredibly rare, magical, and tied exclusively to this one person. You tell yourself that only they have the power to make you feel alive. In reality, they are just a catalyst, someone who happened to bump into a feeling that was already sleeping inside you. When you finally grasp this truth, a quiet, monumental shift begins. Instead of trying to aggressively control your emotions or force yourself to forget them, you simply begin to watch. You turn your gaze inward, and as you do this, your shadow slowly begins to lose its terrifying power over you. You don't have to wage a war against it or defeat it in combat. You only need to acknowledge its presence. When the things that once hid in the dark are brought into the light of your awareness, they lose their ability to secretly manipulate you. Your feelings clear up, your knee-jerk reactions slow down, and you build a peaceful space where you can actually choose how to respond. You are still allowed to feel deeply, but you are no longer a puppet on a string. You become firmly anchored within your own skin. From this solid ground, the relationships you build feel lighter, cleaner, and infinitely more authentic. When your ego is hijacked by your shadow, you stop living from your center. You are constantly yanked around by intense feelings that have no clear origin, trapped in feedback loops of thoughts you can't stop, and dramatic overreactions. You become hypersensitive and easily wounded. You think this raw intensity is love, but true emotion born from awareness doesn't exhaust you. We must remember that defeating the shadow is never the goal. You only need to look at it, because darkness only holds sway over you when you refuse to face it directly. Once you start recognizing the feelings bubbling up inside, your shadow no longer has to scream for your attention through a painful obsession. It slowly integrates into your whole self, transforming from an invisible tyrant into a source of inner strength. At that point, a simple but life-changing truth lands in your heart. You are no longer drawn to people just because they trigger your old wounds. You stand tall on your own 2 feet. Let's move to number 4, archetypes and the psychological trap. Once you recognize how your shadow operates, you have already made incredible progress. You can finally see the hidden machinery that used to drag you forward. But your path doesn't end there, because behind your shadow lies an even deeper, far more ancient layer of the mind. This deep space holds more than just your personal childhood wounds. It contains primal images that have lived within the human psyche for thousands of years. Carl Jung called these structures archetypes. This isn't just about your personal diary anymore, but ancient human blueprints. We can see how these timeless patterns quietly control who you are drawn to, how you attach to them, and how you get completely tangled up with someone you can't even justify with logic. Archetypes don't show up in your head as clear, conscious thoughts. Instead, they behave like a faint, beautiful melody you can't quite hear, yet your body still moves to its rhythm. When someone enters your life and happens to hum that exact same melody, you feel a jolt of something unusual. An intense sense of safety, familiarity, and closeness washes over you, as if you've known them for lifetimes. You call it intuition. You convince yourself there is a rare, cosmic connection between you, but often what you are experiencing is not mutual understanding at all. It is simply the sudden activation of an ancient archetype inside you. It unlocks a heavy door you didn't even know you were carrying in your heart. In that precise second, you start project painting the other person with a depth and wisdom they might not actually have. Think of every person you meet as a key. Some keys only unlock standard, everyday doors, while others slide deep into the locks where archetypes sleep. When they align with that image, they suddenly become monumental. Let us begin by admitting that we often see people not as they truly are, but as something far grander. You no longer look at them as a mere human being with ordinary flaws. Instead, they transform into a symbol, a figure carrying a much deeper, almost sacred meaning. This is why your feelings toward them are no longer simple or easy to define. They carry the heavy weight of ancient patterns that have lived in your soul for a very long time. You might meet someone incredibly gentle, someone who listens to you with an intensity you have never felt before. You convince yourself they are uniquely special. But if you look closer, you will see this feeling does not actually come from them. In reality, this magnetic pull originates from your own inner archetype of connection, representing the masculine or feminine ideal within your own psyche. This is what Carl Jung referred to as the anima and the animus. That other person is not actually creating this profound feeling inside you. They are simply awakening it. You are not truly in love with who they are as an individual. Rather, you are resonating with a deep sense of wholeness that your own soul has been searching for. Sometimes, you encounter someone who radiates confidence and decisive power. Their quiet presence alone completely captivates you, making you feel as though they hold a missing piece of your own soul. That magnetic quality actually belongs to the archetype of the hero, the inner leader that you have never allowed yourself to fully express. At other times, you might find yourself drawn to someone because you want to heal them, protect them, and help them grow into a better version of themselves. You tell yourself this intense urge is pure love, but it is often just the caretaker archetype active within you. You are not actually loving them for who they are in reality. Instead, you are trying to play a role that you could not complete in your own past. You stay with them not for their sake, but because something deep inside your own mind remains unfinished. These deep-seated archetypes work to amplify every emotion in a very quiet, deceptive way. You stop seeing the other person as a flawed human being with their own darkness, limits, and contradictions. Instead, they become a living symbol. A completely ordinary person is suddenly cast as the only one who can ever truly understand you, the sole keeper of your happiness. But the truth is, you are not actually obsessed with them as a person. You are completely spellbound by the archetypal image they project. It is like sitting in a dark theater. The actors are just playing a part. Yet when the lights go down, you willingly choose to believe the entire illusion. Let us examine this closely together, because we often weep, laugh, and react as if the screen is real. Archetypes operate exactly like that cinematic illusion. When your unconscious mind dims the light of active awareness, it projects these symbolic images onto someone else, making you believe they are utterly irreplaceable. If you fail to recognize this psychological projection, you walk straight into a painful trap. You end up constructing an elaborate, beautiful story in your head, while the other person has no idea about the role you have cast them in. The most deceptive part of this process is that archetypes do not only magnify the other person, they simultaneously diminish who you are. You begin to believe this other person possesses some magical quality that you completely lack, placing them high on a pedestal while you assume a desperate position of needing to be completed. From that vulnerable state, you quietly surrender all your personal power. You find yourself waiting for their validation, waiting for them to fill your empty spaces, and waiting for them to hand you the worth you think you do not possess. But the reality is harsh and simple to state, yet incredibly hard to accept. What you admire in them has actually lived inside you all along, These archetypes are the bedrock of your soul. When these patterns remain completely unconscious, they morph into a dangerous psychological trap. You start mistaking mere resonance for true love, emotional activation for written destiny, and a normal human being for a grand symbolic image. As Carl Jung pointed out, the unconscious mind never brings things to the surface by random chance. It always serves up exactly what you need to confront. Yet, if you desperately cling to the person holding that projection, instead of looking into your own mind, you drift further from your true center. The root of your obsession was never them. Now, we must ask ourselves a difficult question. Why is it that the more you think, the more it hurts? While these symbolic images make you view someone with an unrealistic depth, it is the pain that anchors you to them far longer than you ever anticipated. The grand paradox of this suffering is that it does not actually originate from the other person. It stems entirely from your desperate struggle to hold onto a connection that no longer belongs to you. As your mind grips tighter, your emotions constrict in response. When that tension refuses to fade, it stops feeling like a temporary sting and hardens into a dull, constant ache. You convince yourself that they are the cause of your suffering, but underneath it all, you are trapped in a quiet war within your own heart. You are caught in a violent friction between two opposing forces of your own identity. One side of you desperately wants to keep holding on, while the other side is completely exhausted and just wants to let go. This torment does not come from one single event. It is constantly fed by endless loops of repetitive thinking. Every single time you let your mind wander back to them, you are not just remembering a past event. You are actively reopening a raw wound that had only just begun to heal. Replaying old scenarios in your head is not analytical. You are forcing yourself to relive those intense, painful emotions over and over, because your mind cannot tell the difference between memory and reality. As a result, each thought brings the pain back to life, as if it were happening right now. The true source of your exhaustion is not the original event, but the exhausting way you keep keeping it alive inside your mind. Sometimes you tell yourself you are just searching for answers or closure, but in reality, you are simply resisting what is. Carl Jung wisely noted that the vast majority of human suffering does not stem from external events, but from our stubborn refusal to accept things as they are. We have to ask ourselves why we demand that things be different, why we desperately wish they would respond to us, and why we fight so hard for an ending that was never meant to be. Despite your wishes, reality remains completely unchanged, and your internal resistance only creates a painful friction inside your own mind. That person is not the actual source of your suffering. It is the heavy weight of expectations you refuse to let go of that keeps pulling you down. Consider a situation you probably know all too well. They suddenly go completely silent. No text messages, no callbacks, absolutely nothing. In its purest form, that silence is just empty space. But your anxious mind absolutely despises emptiness, so it immediately starts filling the void with painful narratives. You start wondering if you did something wrong, or if you simply are not enough. Every single time you choose to believe one of those toxic assumptions, you build yet another layer of unnecessary suffering. The agony does not live in what they did or did not do. It lives entirely in the stories you tell yourself in the dark. Carl Jung famously warned that whatever you resist will not only persist, but will actually grow larger over time. When you try to gain control over your restless thoughts by thinking even harder, you do not find resolution. You only end up amplifying the noise. You circle back to the exact same questions, the same painful images, and the same heavy feelings, slowly turning that person into a permanent symbol of your own suffering. They slowly transform into the absolute center of a complex emotional orbit that you have unconsciously constructed around them. If we look deeper, the reason your thoughts cause so much pain is because you are desperately trying to answer questions that simply have no answers. You ask yourself why they changed so suddenly, whether they were ever actually sincere, or where exactly you made a mistake. These questions trap you in an endless, agonizing loop. You look outward for answers, but the world around you stays completely silent, forcing your mind to spin endless theories. This suffering does not stem from ignorance, but from your refusal to accept that some secrets remain forever locked. Often, the devastating loss you are mourning is not the actual person, but the beautiful future you had silently mapped out with them in your mind. You had written an entire script filled with deep conversations, shared plans, and quiet moments that never actually happened, yet felt completely real to your heart. When they walk away, that entire mental architecture collapses around you, You are not simply grieving their physical absence from your life. You are grieving the death of a future you fully believed would happen. This is the bitter sting of an unconscious rupture, where internal dreams that never even had the chance to exist are suddenly forced to come to an end. At an even deeper level, this agony is born from a profound fragmentation occurring within your own psyche. One part of you desperately wants to step forward, to let go of the weight, and to finally return to yourself. Yet, another stubborn part of you still clings to the past, desperately holding on to what once was and what was never fully resolved. These two opposing forces drag you in completely opposite directions, leaving you trapped as the literal tension between them. You cannot fully stay, yet you find yourself entirely unable to leave. This constant inner warfare produces a heavy, nameless exhaustion that drains your spirit day by day. Perhaps you and I can finally see that your feelings must be fully acknowledged, understood, and lived through. When you try to force your pain down, you only succeed in burying it deeper inside your own body, where it will wait patiently for the perfect moment to return even stronger than before. Your suffering is not the true enemy here. It is actually a vital signal. It is a loud cry from your soul, begging you to finally recognize something you have been avoiding. Once you stop trying to escape your feelings through endless overthinking, you will finally have the chance to explore inward, no longer asking how to stop thinking of them, but rather what inside you makes it impossible to let go. By making even the slightest adjustment in your focus, you begin the essential process of breaking down that exhausting mental loop. You see, the pain you feel does not come from overthinking. In reality, you are hurting because you are desperately using your mind to cling to something your heart has already recognized you must release. As you begin to embrace this truth, not just as a theory but as a lived experience, those racing thoughts will slowly quiet down, not because you forced them to, but because they are no longer required. Thank you for walking this path with me so far. If this touches your soul, I invite you to stay a little longer. In the moments ahead, we will explore some gentle, actionable steps that can completely transform how you call your personal power back from another person, anchoring it firmly where it has always belonged within your own being. If you feel called to keep exploring these deep spaces with me, subscribing or leaving a like is a beautiful way to let me know you are still here, listening, and ready to dive deeper. Now, let us look at step number 6, the practice of actively reclaiming your energy. Remember, this profound process of calling your spirit back does not start with a desperate attempt to force yourself to forget them. Instead of forcing forgetfulness, your healing actually starts with a much smaller, quieter act, simply noticing where and when your vitality is leaking away. Every single time you feel your chest tighten during a sudden silence, every time your mind drifts backward into an old memory, or every time you catch yourself wondering what they might be thinking, just pause. Ask yourself in that quiet space, what part of me is reaching out toward them right now? Do not look for a perfect answer. This question acts like a match struck in a pitch-black room, instantly slowing down the unconscious drift of your energy so you can see your own patterns clearly. The moment you become aware of this invisible drain, do not try to block it with force. Instead, gently guide your focus back to your own physical presence. It is natural for your mind to drift away, weaving elaborate stories when you are consumed by someone. Yet, your physical body remains rooted in the absolute present, free from judgment or analysis. Take a moment to feel the temperature of your hands, or follow the cool air entering your nostrils as you breathe. Observe the steady rise and fall of your chest. These physical anchors hold immense power, pulling you away from the mental screen where that person's memory is playing. By returning your awareness to your body, you naturally strip away the momentum of your racing mind without having to fight it at all. You do not need to struggle against your thoughts, you simply have to stop nourishing them. An even deeper layer of this practice involves learning to tell the difference between raw emotion and the elaborate narratives your mind constructs. When you catch yourself thinking about this person, you assume they are the subject of your thoughts, but you are actually confronting the deep, unhealed feelings they sparked within you, like the terror of being abandoned or the heavy weight of unrequited love. Rather than searching for answers outside of yourself, turn your focus inward and ask, what am I feeling right now? This shift in attention demands no heavy analysis or problem solving. It simply asks you to identify the raw sensation, whether it is grief, panic, rejection, or hollow space. When you sit courageously with the actual feeling, without trying to escape or sugarcoat it, the grip of that person's image will weaken, because you no longer use them to run away from your own inner landscape. Simultaneously, you must practice separating their actions from your self-worth, since minds naturally personalize everything, transforming mere silence into rejection. A brief pause in communication can easily feel like a permanent shift in their affection, but the truth is far less personal. Every individual operates within their own universe, dealing with invisible burdens, daily stress, and private concerns that you cannot possibly perceive. Their behavior is rarely a direct statement about your value as a human being. When you softly remind yourself that their actions belong to their journey and do not define your worth, you slice through the unseen cords that have kept your peace hostage. Each time you make this conscious choice, you retrieve a fragment of the power you previously surrendered. Beyond these practices lies a highly underrated yet incredibly vital tool, the practice of stepping into intentional silence. If you are always crowding your mind with noise and endless analysis, you lock out any possibility of real healing or fresh perspective. Yet, it is precisely within the stillness that your nervous system can naturally restore and recalibrate itself. By sitting quietly without an agenda, without trying to manage your thoughts, and letting your breath flow freely, you will start to hear the quiet truths you have long suppressed. Although facing this stillness can feel unsettling at first, you will find it is not a weakness, but a gathering of your scattered self. Gathering those scattered pieces of yourself is what allows you to reclaim your peace from the things that once pulled you away. Ultimately, this entire process centers on a simple truth that is incredibly difficult to live out: the daily commitment to return home to yourself. You do not achieve this through massive, dramatic lifestyle changes, but through small, tender moments of genuine self-care. Nourishing your physical body, dedicating time to activities that bring you comfort, and honoring your feelings instead of escaping them will slowly rekindle your inner warmth. As that internal light steadies, you will find that this person no longer dominates your thoughts. It is not necessary for this person to vanish completely from your memory to find peace. Rather, they just settle back into their proper place as a passenger who crossed your path, rather than the focal point of your entire universe. The psychologist Carl Jung once observed that true enlightenment does not come from visualizing beings of light, but from making the unconscious darkness conscious. This healing path is not about forcing amnesia, it is about finding the bravery to confront your own shadow, the neglected corners where you poured your energy without knowing it. Embracing these parts of yourself naturally transforms how you view that old connection. This profound shift happens not because their behavior has altered in any way, but because you are no longer viewing them through the distorted lens of your own unhealed wounds. Of course, you will still experience moments when their face drifts into your mind, or a sudden memory surfaces, but the accompanying sensation will lose its sharp, agonizing sting. It will feel softer, more distant, like an old photograph of a place that once defined your world but no longer has power over you. Perhaps you and I can agree that instead of regret, the most beautiful outcome is a quiet appreciation for the experience, because it ultimately forced you to face your own depth, initiating the most important reunion of your life, meeting yourself.